very special welcome to Venkachalapathy, the speaker for this evening, and who has just recently won the Sahitya Akademi Award for 2020. A very big thanks, as always, to Ashmitas for being a very gracious host yet again. Many of you regularly attend our programs and would be familiar with INTAC, but just for the benefit of those who may not be familiar, may I just give a brief introduction. We're delighted to share that INTAC has just completed 40 years of its existence since the founding of its organization. INTAC itself is an acronym for the Indian National Trust for Art and Cultural Heritage, established in 1984 as a not-for-profit organization. INTAC's mission to conserve heritage is based on the belief that living in harmony with heritage enhances quality of life. It is stated in the Constitution of India, Article 51A(f), that, open quotes, it should be the duty of every citizen of India to value and preserve the rich heritage of our composite culture. INTAC endeavors to achieve this vision in conservation by sensitizing the public and creating awareness about the pluralistic cultural legacy of India, protecting and preserving India's built heritage, natural heritage, living heritage, both tangible and intangible heritage, documenting and protecting heritage, developing heritage policies, providing expertise in the field of conservation, encouraging capacity building through skills training programs, undertaking emergency response measures during natural or man-made disasters like earthquakes, etc. And importantly, forming heritage clubs in schools and through heritage education, inculcating in children a sense of pride and concern for our heritage. We have over 200 chapters nationwide formed merely by volunteers, and it is only through the passion and strength of volunteers across our chapters that INTAC takes its vision forward. At Chennai chapter, we have, through walks, talks, seminars and workshops, been creating awareness about the significance of our heritage. I invite you to join hands with us at INTAC Chennai chapter to save and protect our heritage. We're here to answer your queries, and membership information is available at the desk in the lobby. INTAC's focus, as I already mentioned, is on various aspects of heritage, including built heritage, natural heritage, intangible and cultural heritage. And our nation's history is very much intertwined with this. When the nation's 75th year of independence was celebrated, we recorded videos of elders who shared their living memories of the era of independence and uploaded these on YouTube, and you can watch it on the INTAC Chennai chapter YouTube channel. Venkachalapathy today enlighten us about the freedom fighter VOC, Chidambaram Pillai, the Tirunelveli uprising against the British, which they had termed riots, and its importance in our thirst for independence. His book Tirunelveli and Ciyum, Ciyum, 1908, Tirunelveli uprising, and Chidambaram Pillai, 1908, is the result of 20 years of deep research on VOC, a tale of heroism and defiance in the face of colonial oppression, and the power of an individual's vision to ignite a movement. I have the pleasure of introducing Mr. Venkachalapathy. A.R. Venkachalapathy historian, author and translator, has recently bagged the Sahitya Akademi Award 2024. He writes and publishes in Tamil and English and is a professor at the Madras Institute of Development Studies, MIDSC. Venkachalapathy has degrees from the University of Madras and Madurai Kamarajar University and received his PhD in history from Jawaharlal Nehru University with his dissertation on social history of Tamil publishing. He specializes in the social, cultural and intellectual history of modern Tamil Nadu and has taught at universities in Tirunelveli, Chennai, Singapore and Chicago. Venkachalapathy is a prolific writer and has written both in English and in Tamil. His publications in English include Swadeshi Steel, V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, and The Battle Against the British Maritime Empire. The brief history of a very big book, The Making of the Tamil Encyclopedia. Tamil characters, personalities, politics, culture. Who owns that song? The battle for Subramanya Bharati's copyright. The province of the book. Scholars, scribes, and scribblers in colonial Tamil Nadu. And in those days there was no coffee, writings and cultural history. He is noted for collecting and publishing the works of Tamil writer Pudumai Pittai. Venkachalapathy has written and edited over 30 books in Tamil, including Andakalathil Kaappi Illai and today's subject, Tirunelveli Ezhuchiyum, Ciyum, 1908. He is a recipient of the V.K.R.V. Rao Prize, History of 2007 and the Mahakavi Bharati Award, Government of Tamil Nadu 2022. 2 awards for lifetime contribution to Tamil, the Vilakku Pudumai Pittai Award 2018 and Iyal Virudu 2021, and of course, most recently the prestigious Sahitya Akademi Award. We welcome you and breathe on our
Vanakkam, good evening. Before I thank Sujata and Intact for this invitation, first I have to apologize. I have a bad allergic cough. I am going to break into bouts of cough frequently. Please bear with me. I think that the second time I am taking part in an Intact event, but on the earlier occasion it was an online event. So this is the first time I am actually meeting the audience in person in an Intact event. So what I am going to do for the next 3 hours is to give a long talk on Chidambaram. Don't be scared. I will try to finish in 15 minutes. Please alert me when I cross the 45-minute mark. Yes, this talk is based on a book that won the award recently, but it has a very long history. The first iteration was written actually 38 years ago. The subject of this book is the Tirunelveli uprising, which took place on March 13, 1908. But this event is practically unknown. When I first went to Tirunelveli and Tuticorin in 1985, I travelled across the district, went to Tirunelveli, Tuticorin and other towns and villages there. There was no memory of that event. There is no monument, there is not even a plaque or a stone or a pillar to commemorate that event. So what I have done is to unearth that story. First I want to begin with the Rowlatt Act. All of you would be familiar with the Rowlatt Act. Gandhi famously called it a lawless law. I think that is a very important phrase, especially in the times that we are living in. Just because a law is enacted in a house with people's representatives, it doesn't actually become law. Law has to have a sound moral basis. So the Rowlatt Act came about after a committee was formed by the British government. It was called the Sedition Committee. And because its chairman was named Rowlatt, it went by the name of the Rowlatt Commission. The Rowlatt Committee report, which is now very easily available on the net, you can see that there is a very small section on what happened in Tamil Nadu during the freedom struggle up to 1980. There is a passage on what is called the Tirunelveli riots. Basically, it describes what happened after Chidambaram Pillai and two of his friends, associates and colleagues were arrested. The day following it, on the 13th of March, the two towns of Tirunelveli and Tuticorin erupted in violence. People took to the streets, and in Tirunelveli they burned down practically all the public buildings. There was a police firing, some people were shot dead, many were tried in court and they were jailed. This in brief is the story. Why is this important? And why should it be remembered and why should it be commemorated? I think it comes, this particular event is one of the very few spontaneous uprisings in the history of the freedom movement in Tamil Nadu. You would be familiar with the Chowri Chowra event and various other events. But if you look at the history of the freedom struggle in South India, in Tamil Nadu especially, this is possibly one of the only one really spontaneous uprising, and I believe that it is an event that needs to be studied for a variety of reasons. This is what I set out to do, and that is what ended up as this book. So, to first start, so this is the cover of the book. And here is the hero of our story. This is a really brilliant photograph. This photograph, whenever I see this photograph, this detail of Chidambaram Pillai's portrait, I still am moved by the amazing dignity that he carries himself. You can see that, there is a certain resoluteness to his face. That you can see that he is not made of ordinary stuff. So, this is my search for this man that ended up as this book. So, what was the story behind it? To trace that, we have to go to this particular map. This is the map of the Tirunelveli district, the unified Tirunelveli district. What is now divided into Tirunelveli, Thoothukudi and Tenkasi districts. As all of us know, early in the 20th century, sometime after the Indian National Congress was formed, in the first 20 years, the Indian National Congress was an annual event where suited and booted people, very knowledgeable people, gathered together and talked about the future of India. In fact, the very first conference, a leading role was played by a person from Tamil Nadu, a journalist, G. Subramania Iyer, who was also the founder of not one but two great newspapers, the Hindu and the Swadeshi. Only 72 people attended that conference. So it is customary to kind of ridicule the early leaders of the Congress. If you look at any textbook, to talk about these leaders as coming from a very narrow social base, and many of them, for instance, when they traveled to the conference, they traveled in separate coaches with a huge entourage of camp followers and others. But that is to completely miss the point. Because many of these leaders were great thinkers, and some of the ideas that we are discussing even now originated from them. They were talking about not just an independent India, but what kind of India is going to be created after independence. One of the key ideas that they floated was the idea of economic nationalism. Of course, at a time when we are talking about a very warped idea of cultural nationalism, economic nationalism is taking a backseat. To put it in a nutshell, basically, some of the leading lights of the early Congress, like Dadabhai Naoroji, Ramesh Chandra Dutt, our own G. Subramanya Iyer, they formulated an elaborate theory of how, under colonial rule, India was being drained of its wealth, how it was deindustrialized, how its handicrafts were destroyed, and how a very vexatious and exploitative revenue system ended up pauperizing the common people. So this is the idea of economic nationalism. But they also talked about other things. Gopal Krishna Gokhale, who people don't remember at all these days, way back in 1912, he talked about free, universal, primary education. So I suppose, we should not ridicule somebody who has proposed such an idea more than 100 years ago. But what really changed the Indian nationalist movement, it's not just ideas. How do ideas influence people? Like all rulers, the British were also scared of ideas. So they kept a careful tab on the early congressmen, and to weaken that movement, even though it had not become a mass movement, by 1903 they decided that Bengal, which seemed to be the hotbed, the seedbed of Indian nationalism, should be weakened. And so they used the time-tested method of divide and rule, and citing administrative reasons, Bengal was proposed to be partitioned. But what happened subsequently was that it led to a mass movement, which we historians call the Swadeshi movement. The key ideas behind it was that to attain Swaraj, that is independence, it was very vaguely defined. To achieve independence, what we needed to do was to encourage indigenous enterprise, boycott foreign goods, and third, promote national education. These were the ideas, and this caught the imagination of the people. So what we find after the announcement of the partition of Bengal is that there was a great mass movement across Bengal. People were mobilized. It was through this movement that great figures like Tagore becomes a truly national poet, national figure only during the Swadeshi movement. It creates a number of other important thinkers and mass leaders who go on to lead the Indian nationalist movement and freedom struggle in the subsequent decades. So I will not dwell too much on that. What was the reputation of our own dear Tamil Nadu and Chennai in those days. In those days, Tamil Nadu was, South India was ridiculed as a sleepy hollow. The entire province was called a benighted province. There was very little political activity. Yes, there are a number of important figures, forgotten figures, which is keeping a historian like me busy for the last 40 years because they are forgotten for a long time. So, but in this context, when the Swadeshi movement was gaining in strength in Bengal, in Punjab, in Maharashtra, Tamil Nadu seemed to be lagging behind. It is at this time that our hero makes his entry. So this is our hero here, Vausi. He was born in 1872 in a small, very small town near Thoothukudi. He came from an affluent family with good education, with a good cultural background. But nothing actually prepares us for what he went on to achieve when he became something like 26 or 27. Between 1872 and the 1890s, what we know of him is very sketchy. He was not a spectacularly academically very proficient. He passed his matriculation very late. He passed a leadership examination and practiced in the lower courts. But he had a successful practice. He became so successful within that small, his hometown, that he moves to the town of Thoothukudi in 1900 when he is 28 years old. From his autobiography, he wrote an autobiography in verse form. From that, we know that he followed the happenings, contemporary happenings very closely. He read newspapers, he was in touch with many people, but it was a very modest kind of situation that he was in. Also, Thoothukudi at that time was probably the 5th or 6th largest port town in India. There was a very brisk trade going on between Thoothukudi and Colombo. So now let us go back to Bengal. What was happening in Bengal? I said the Swadeshi movement was all about the encouragement of Swadeshi industries. So what they first tried to do was that they started small Swadeshi activities. For the most part, the Swadeshi enthusiasts were making Swadeshi candles, Swadeshi agarbattis. I don't know about Swadeshi mosquito repellents, but they were making Swadeshi buttons, they were making Swadeshi bangles, all very good intention, but nothing that was going to make the Governor General, some Viceroys and Secretary of States lose their sleep. At this time, in our benighted province, in the southernmost corner of this benighted province, this man, our hero, has a spectacular idea. He says, he had read Tirunelveli, he was well versed in Tirunelveli. Said, so probably he took a cue from Tirunelveli who said, Ulluvadu Uyarvullu, think big. So he really thought big. So his eyes were set on starting nothing less than a shipping enterprise. To this day, after 40 years of work, I have not been able to fathom or figure out how a small time leader from a little town comes up with this victory. This story of a shipping company is key to the talk that I am going to give, because that is at the background of the Tirunelveli uprising. So suddenly, all out of the blue, in early 1906, we get a small newspaper report in the Hindu and also in the Ceylon Observer. There is just a 2-line report. It says that one V.O. Chidambaram Pillai, a local pleader and Tamil scholar, has taken up some Swadeshi activities. So this is the 2-line report that I located in the Hindu in March 1906. A few weeks later, there is a longer report in the Ceylon Observer from Colombo, which says that there is somebody called Chidambaram Pillai who has come to Colombo. He is planning to, he is talking about starting some Swadeshi shipping enterprise. We are not able to understand what it is. So they immediately go and contact the local agent of the world's biggest shipping company of the time, the British India Steam Navigation Company, which was founded in the 1850s. It was such a huge company, it was a behemoth, and it was so big that a historian who wrote the history of the British India Steam Navigation Company actually calls it a parastate. It is for all practical purposes like the state. It is an adjunct of the British state. It has a monopoly over shipping of mail. The company was used to transport troops, military troops, during the 1857 revolt. It practically controlled the indentured labor traffic. The millions of Indians who were taken across the world to work as practically as slaves, even though they were called indentured laborers. This was with the British India Steam Navigation Company. And over a 50-year period, they had destroyed all the local shipping enterprises. They had destroyed not only shipping enterprises, but almost all the small ports on the Coromandel coast. By having a tie-up with the South Indian Railway, they ensured that all freight was carried from all over peninsular India and other parts of India through the train, so that you reach the major ports, Calcutta, Madras and Tuticorin. So it had a complete monopoly. The monopoly was so complete that whatever little enterprises that were tried to be launched were crushed. This crushing, the way they crushed it, would make look Donald Trump like a kid. Okay? Because there were no laws, there were no regulations for monopolistic and restrictive trade practices, anything could be done. So they would launch a rate war. If somebody charged 1 rupee, they would cut down their price to 8 annas, 4 annas. Sometimes they even shipped the freight and passengers free. Sometimes they even gave gifts. So that is how they also gave so-called incentives to all the traders, through which they ensured that anybody who started any kind of shipping enterprise would be not only thrown out of business but actually bankrupt. This, to give 2 examples. One small example, Rabindranath Tagore's elder brother had a small shipping company. Within 6 months, it was crushed. On the other hand, you had the Tatas. The Tatas established a company in 1893. That company was crushed within a year. So this was the story of the British India Steam Navigation Company. And it got worse during the First World War. I'm just getting ahead of the story, but just to give an indication of how big this company was. The company was merged with another global behemoth, the Peninsular and Oriental Steam Navigation Company. So it became so big. To give one indication, the Scindia Steam Navigation Company, I am making reference to this because I understand that somebody from the shipping corporation is here. India commemorates, the government of India commemorates April 5th as the National Maritime Day. Okay? You would think that this particular day commemorates the greatest shipping enterprise via India. But unfortunately, no. It commemorates what happened in 1919 when the Scindia Steam Navigation Company for the first time sent a ship from Bombay to London. The ship ironically was called Loyalty. Okay? So that is what we are commemorating. There have been some efforts made by some people to pressurize the government of India into changing the significance of the day. So I am making this plea to whoever is here. I understand one Captain Venkat Iyer is taking the initiative to do this. Okay, this is the story when the Scindia Steam Navigation Company, which was a much bigger company and had deeper pockets because they were Gujarati merchants. They were very close to political leaders. I am talking about 100 years ago. Please don't get me wrong. I don't talk about contemporary politics at all. So 100 years ago, when they started this company, immediately they faced a big rate war from the British India Steam Navigation Company. It became so desperate that Narottam Morarji, he was a big figure, not for a moment I am under valuing the work of these merchants. Narottam Morarji goes and tries to seek an appointment with Lord Inchcape, who is the head of the British India Steam Navigation Company. In 1922, he says only one thing: there is no need for an appointment. I can buy out your company. Let me know if you are ready. So that is the only reply that he got for when he asked for an interview. But 1 year later, he gave an appointment, and a modus vivendi was worked out, wherein British India Steam Navigation Company told Scindia, gave a long list of conditions. They said, if you agree to all these conditions, we will not crush. And Narottam Morarji actually signed this list, which he called as the slavery bond. Basically, it meant that it would limit the tonnage, it would limit practically everything. So this was after the First World War, when the British realized that when a world war goes on, to have a weak colony is to weaken the metropole. In that situation, if Lord Inchcape and British India Steam Navigation Company could, basically insult and humiliate a big Indian company, what would have happened in 1906 when there was no challenge? So now we come back to the story. So, Chidambaram Pillai, as I said, in Colombo, the correspondent of Ceylon Observer makes a mention of Chidambaram Pillai, and they actually goes and talks to him. This is probably the first interview, published interview that VOC gives. This man says that, the reporter says that, this man is talking something like, chartering ships, rivaling the British India Steam Navigation Company, and a whole range of things. It really doesn't sound all that credible. So he goes and talks to the local agent. When I say local agent, don't imagine a brown-skinned man. All British India Steam Navigation Company agents in all the ports were Europeans, or more specifically British, or even more specifically Scottish. So parochialism and nepotism is not the monopoly of Indians. So this is how they had a very strong network. So they go and talk to that Stanley Boyce. He says that, no, I really don't know what is happening. It doesn't seem like anything is going to happen. But within 2 months, Chidambaram Pillai has rallied the traders in Tuticorin. The fundamental grounds that the traders in Tuticorin had was that, in a monopolistic situation, they simply could not get the right terms. So business was being affected to a great extent. But what was worse was that there was also the racial aspect of this. When the shippers, the stevedores, the shipping agents, the port officers, the medical officers are all whites, and the traders are all brown skinned, if not actually black skinned, they are not going to be treated well. So racist slurs and insults were very common. They had tried to address this issue by writing to the head office, but nobody cared. In this context, when the Swadeshi movement has come up, I think that is the mood. In that mood, VOC starts this. Right? We still really don't know what was the particular spark. We don't know this mainly because of this man himself. Half the blame should go to this man, because he was a very self-effacing man. He would not, shout from the rooftops about what he did. He never spoke about his achievements, so we don't know much of what he did. He was always very, in the various documents that we have, he never claimed anything for himself. He always said, just give one instance. This is one of the very moving instances. Some 10-15 years after this drama that we are talking about, he gives a talk on Chennai Madras beach. This is in protest against the Rowlatt bills. When he is speaking, there is another person sharing the podium. That is Somasundara Bharadiyar. Somasundara Bharadiyar was a friend of Subramania Bharadiyar. He was an employee of the Swadeshi company. He was a man with nationalist spirit, sentiment, everything. But at that time he was, I don't want to use that word, he was small fry. Okay, he is chairing the podium. The meeting is chaired by nobody less than Rangasamy Iyengar. There are going to be lots of Iyers and Iyengars in this particular story. Rangasamy Iyengar, who is the nephew of Kasturanga Iyengar, manager of the Hindu, later editor of Swadeshi, he is chairing the meeting. Obviously, he is very emotional. He says that this is a great occasion. Today we have two people here. One, we have Chidambaram Pillai, who launched the great shipping company, and sharing the dais with him is Somasundara Bharadiyar, who helped Chidambaram Pillai in this particular venture. So we should be very happy that these two people. when Chidambaram Pillai rose up to speak, he said, I have to correct what Rangasamy Iyengar said. What Rangasamy Iyengar said is not right. Somsudra Bharatiya did not help me in running the company. We actually ran the company together. We were the two eyes of that, which is actually not true. Somsudra Bharatiya did a lot of things, but he was a very small figure. But this is the kind of man that Chidambaram Pillai was. Self-effacing, not taking credit. One fallout of this particular character trait of VOC is that we don't get enough. So let me try to telescope the narrative. So they first charter ships. He charters a ship from Bombay, and the chartered ship runs for a few months. At first, neither the British India Company nor the government are particularly threatened by this venture. They know about Indians very well. They have ruled India for more than a century. Although they also probably know a lot about Tamil people. தமிழர்கள் என்ன அவங்களுடைய ஆரம்ப சூரத்தனம் அப்படின்றது எல்லாருக்கும் தெரியும். தொடங்கும் போது நம்ம வானத்தை வில்லா வளைச்சிருவோம் சார், மணலை கயிறா திரிச்சிருவோம் சார் அப்படின்வாங்க. But after a few weeks, few months, you find no trace of all this big talk. So they also thought that this would just fritter away. But 2 months pass, 3 months pass, the company is literally gathering steam. So British India Company talked to the person who was chartered the ship and wrecked that thing. So one fine day, the ship's not, the steamer doesn't arrive, and all the freight is on the ships. So the other characteristic trait of Tamils, one is Aramba Surattanam, the other one is people around you. If you are going to start some big project, what are your friends going to say? They are going to encourage you, they are going to help you, they are saying what a wonderful idea you have, you are going to succeed. சொன்ன கேட்டிங்களாப்பா, அது வெள்ளக்காரனோட போட்டி போடலாம், நம்மளால முடியும். இதெல்லாம் எதுக்கு சார் வேண்டாத வேலை. Same, this is the British played 75% part in crushing the company. The other part was played by our own friends. So discouragement starts. I will not go into that story. I have written a big book on that topic, the Swadeshi company itself. So this is the background I have to, before I go into the uprising itself. Another 20 minutes? Okay. So next, when the chartered ship doesn't turn up and all these traders are wringing their hands and trying to blame Vausi. Vausi says, if we can't charter ships, he said, why don't we buy a ship? Traders are all shocked. He said, did we hear you right? Did you say we should buy a ship? No, he said, no, you heard me wrong. I didn't say we'll buy a ship. We are going to buy 2 ships. This knocks the wind out of the various traders who are part of this. This is not possible. How are you going to do it? And he says, how are you going to raise the capital? So then we'll start a public limited company. I said, what? Starting a public limited company? I checked with some friends. In 2025, in the last 2-3 years, from what we know, not a single public limited company has been registered in Thoothukudi or Tirunelveli district in the last 3 years. Okay? Now, 100 years ago, here is this man who is talking about promoting a public limited company. We are supposed to be what? What is our rank in ease of doing business? It's in the hundreds, I suppose. We take a good, God knows how many months. But very interestingly, 100 years ago, within a matter of months, he did promote a company. But my question is not perhaps not the right Tamil Padamuri, but appropriate. முன்ன பின்ன தெரிஞ்ச செத்துருந்தா சுடுகாடு தெரியும்னு சொல்லுவாங்க. How do you register a company? How do you write a prospectus? How do you draft a memorandum of association? How do you draft articles of association? Can you imagine all these things? He does all these things. I will not go into this. So the shipping company, and then he actually buys a ship. 2 ships are bought for a year. It really gives the British India Company a run for its money. In fact, it comes to a stage in December 1907, that is within about a year and a half of starting the shipping company. The Congress meets at Surat, the famous or infamous Congress session where there is a split in the Congress between the Tilak camp and the moderates. Vausi is in Tilak's camp. When he comes back, he is even more fired up. So when he comes back, for the next 2 months, something extraordinary happens in these 2 towns of Tirunelveli and Tuticorin. I am sorry, the image is not very clear. So in these 2 towns, something extraordinary happens. Vausi is a pioneer in many other things. He takes the message of the energized Congress to the people. How does he do it? He organizes public meetings and speaks in Tamil. This is a very flat statement, right? You organize public meetings and speak in Tamil. But actually this is not a plain statement. It's actually a very dramatic statement because before that no public meetings were held in colonial India, certainly in Tamil Nadu. Meetings meant closed halls where people spoke in English. Somebody would propose your name, somebody would second your name, then somebody will deliver a welcome address, then you give a talk, then you pass resolutions, somebody proposes it, somebody seconds it, and then you send this resolutions to the government. This is what public meetings mean. For the first time, Vausi organizes public meetings on the streets, on the shores of Tuticorin and Tirunelveli, and they speak in Tamil. And like, to hit the ground running, the very first speeches that are given in Tamil are some of the most extraordinary speeches. There are police notes on the talks. People who listen to him have mentioned it. To put it briefly, people who listen to him have taken over by great nationalist ambition. In this, he is joined by a couple of other friends. This is Subramanya Siva, who actually walks from Trivandrum to Tirunelveli, hearing that something big is happening in the town of Tuticorin. He walks, and on the way he meets people and then arrives in Tuticorin. Then this person, completely forgotten, called Padmanabha Iyengar, he also is from Trivandrum. He also comes to Thoothukudi, and for something like a month or so, every day there are meetings. People gather in thousands. The mood is palpable. They are really fired up by the nationalist imagination and the nationalist spirit. To give one indication, during the month of February, according to the even police reports and the reports of the British India Steam Navigation Company, no freight was shipped from Thoothukudi to Colombo on a British ship. All of them went through the Swadeshi ship. Now, already there is tension within the Swadeshi company. There is a bunch of moderates who are saying, we have used politics to establish our business. Now let us take care of business, let us leave alone politics. Very, very prescient, very prophetic. But VOC says, my idea is not to run a business and declare dividends and profits. So there is already pressure from there. But by now, the government is getting very jittery. So it sends a new collector to Tirunelveli. And Chidambaram Pillai doesn't stop with that. In February 1908, he also leads a strike in the local British owned cotton mills. So he is attacking every economic target. Now they realize that things are getting out of hand. So now Winch, the collector, summons VOC. Already VOC has had talks with the sub-collector Rowlatt, but now it is moved, it gets escalated. And at that moment, an important event takes place. Bipin Chandra Pal from Bengal, he had been arrested and put in prison for 6 months. The reason is very interesting. He had published in the Bande Mataram an article by Aravind Ghosh, but without the name. The government said you have to disclose the name of the author. Bipin Chandra Pal says, no, I cannot do it. Then you will have to go to prison. So he goes to prison. The day he comes out, it is decided to commemorate that day. So that day, VOC is planning to commemorate in Thoothukudi, and it is expected to be a monster meeting according to the police reports. That's why Collector Winch summons him to Tirunelveli from Thoothukudi. The idea is to stop him from conducting the meeting. So morning he goes. There is no meeting. Only in the afternoon he commences the proceedings. And here, this is where the great, I wouldn't say courage or bravery, the sheer audacity of this man. As the proceedings are going on, at 5 o'clock, he turns to the collector and says, can we adjourn the meeting for tomorrow? Right? He's talking to the collector. When I say collector, please remember that in those days the collector was not just the collector. Collector was also the district magistrate. The district magistrate could actually give us summary punishment, including caning. So the collector and district magistrate, this man tells him, this brown-skinned man tells this white officer, can we adjourn the meeting? This man's interested. Why do you want to adjourn the meeting? He said, no, I want to go and give a public lecture to commemorate Paul's release. which is furious. You see, the very purpose of summoning you here is to thwart that meeting. He said, I have to go. And the meeting starts very late. After 7:30, VOC steps out. Imagine in those days, practically no electricity, no way to pass information, no WhatsApp, no social media. 2,000 to 3,000 people gathered together and he speaks to them. So next 2 days, the negotiations go on. What we find is VOC is uncompromised. And this is recorded both in the government records, in officials, but it is also being recorded in the most emotional language by none other than our own Subramania Bharat. One of the greatest songs, Sonda Naatile Parakadime Seide Tunjido Vini Anjido. That is the song which threatens Vaati Madakiyume Sirekkul Maatuve Vali Kaatuve. He threatens it, but Chidambaram responds in equal measure. Puduthalam engal selvam kullai pogavo naangal saagavo. And it becomes clear that there's no way that anything could be negotiated with this man. On the afternoon of 12th, VOC, Subramania Siva and Padmanabha Iyengar are arrested. The government and the police think everything is going to be fine. But the next day, at about 10 in the morning, the mood is very different in both Tirunelveli and Tuticorin. Suddenly a crowd starts gathering. What is now? Is there anybody from Tirunelveli here? What is it? Yeah. Okay, Tirunelveli. Okay. In those days there was no junction. Okay? Junction comes later. What is now the junction? Veeraragamapuram. A crowd gathers. They go to the Hindu college. From the Hindu college, another set of students and teachers join together and they start moving west towards the Nelayapur. And as they move, they attack every public building. Every public building is attacked. They burn the records. They challenge the people there. They don't physically harm anybody. That is a very interesting thing. It's a very, people generally talk about it. Words, riots. I use the word uprising. I didn't use the word riots. Because riots are faceless people indulging in purposeless violence. This was an uprising. Hardly ever anybody was beaten up. Even the Europeans were not touched. They were hounded, they were chased. So they moved from one place to another. Buildings were attacked, records were burnt. There was a municipal oil depot, and the municipal oil depot was set fire to. When police challenged them, they asked these police, "Pani Sudesiya, Paradesiya?" If you are a Sudesi, join us. If you are a Paradesi, you go down. Then they go to an office and pull down the portrait of King Edward VII. Very interesting is that in one particular office, in the drawer, an amount of something like 1,400 rupees is there. Quite a substantial sum, right? Not a paisa was touched. The money stayed there. The records were. So this crowd kept moving. And to understand this crowd, we have to go a little further back. What had happened over the 2 months before that was that the Indians, the local people, had completely lost fear of the white man. That was the amazing. What had happened in the few weeks before is that first, the butchers of Tuticorin stopped selling meat to Europeans. Then water used to be carted in barrels. They were waylaid by Indians when they went to the European quarters. The entire team of Jatka drivers refused to take European commuters. And the icing on the cake was the barbers of Tuticorin. So there was a famous case. This is recorded in all the newspapers and also in police reports. There was one lawyer for the British India Company. How am I doing for time? I need to. That's for the organizers too. I'll try to finish as quickly as possible. This K.R. Rangasamy Iyengar he works for the British India Company and goes around abusing Chidambaram Pillai and the shipping company and everything. So one barber goes, as you know, every 15 days, Amavasya Nikelo undu Savaram Panniranga. Pogumbodhu this fellow has said something nasty about cows. The barber stopped shaving in midway, packed his box and left. No barber in the entire town was ready to complete this shave. So he was taken with police escort to Tirunelveli. In Tirunelveli also, the service could not be provided. And finally, he was taken to Madurai. That's where, and I am sure his forebears in heaven, their ablutions got delayed, certainly by a year, but I don't know whether they bothered about it. But this is how it was. More importantly, whenever Europeans walked on the streets, boys and children would shout Vande Mataram. And then there was this principal of Hindu college. Here also, you have to remember that the principal of the Hindu college. What do you think would be the age of the principal of a college? 70? 50. He is a European, right? He was 25 years old. So he is the principal of Hindu college. This is what racism is. This is what racism is. When I first got a university job at the age of 27, they said, my aunt was the vice chancellor of that university. That's what they said. This is how India works. If you are a white man, this is what. So this Herbert Champion, he says that the mood shifted. Earlier people used to move away and give way. Now Jatka drivers purposely, give me, overtake me from the left, they tease me. Now this is the mood that is created. Now this is the crowd. So this is not some faceless, riotous mob that went and attacked people. This is the people who went. And then by the time the police arrived, it was led by the collector himself, and the immediate provocation for the firing was that the collector asked a person in the shop, in a Swadeshi emporium, why have you put up festoons everywhere? He said, and we are celebrating the release of Venkachalapathy. He is telling, earlier we found Chidambaram Pillai challenging the collector. Now an ordinary man on the street is talking back to the collector. So he shoots him. That's a firing. I have a long chapter on how the crowd actually worked, how it moved, how it attacked, what did they do. They were shouting all the time, Vande Mataram, Chidambaram Pillai Valga, Swaraj. This is how it went. But it was, firing happened, 4 people died. At the same time, in the afternoon, in Tuticorin, in a different place, in a place called Vandipettai, where there is a narrow entrance, which Ash went in with his mounted police. He was attacked, and there was a quote unquote, and a prohibited meeting was going on. So the entire 2 towns were agog. They were furious with what had happened, and they were protesting. So, but then by then the reserve police arrived, many were arrested, hundreds of people were arrested. Unfortunately, we don't have real numbers those days, even though the Hindus sent a special correspondent from Chennai to record everything. The long and short of it was that the uprising was quelled. VOC himself got a double life imprisonment, but the people who were involved, we know some of the details. By looking at the names and their occupation, I could figure out that people from all communities took part in that uprising. There is not one caste or one religious community which is left out. It is to the credit of VOC and the Swadeshi movement. Then, if you look at the occupation, they come from all walks of life. Petty shopkeepers, sadka drivers, butchers, everybody is with them. And for the next few months, practically a witch hunt goes. People who had fled, they were all, special police patrols went and caught hold of them. And they were all convicted. Many of them boys were caned. People who were younger than 18, they were caned. I have all the details in the book. But let me come to the final one important thing. But the government did not want to stop with arresting and convicting them. I suppose in those days there were no bulldozers, so bulldozers were not used to destroy the homes of people who protested, but they did something else. There was a very, what can you say, cruel kind of act which doesn't exist anymore, called the Punitive Police Act. Punitive Police Act means that when there is a violence in some place, a so-called riot, the government would station a police force. It was a punitive police force. Their job was to just stay there, eat good food, கோழி ஆடெல்லாம் வெட்டி சாப்பிட்டு சந்தோஷமாக in uniform you roam around the place and instill fear in the people. So a punitive police was stationed for 6 months, and a tax is imposed on the people. It is a collective form of retribution. We know of various collective forms of retribution. One just probably, hopefully got over a month ago. But so this kind of collective retribution was inflicted upon people. What happened subsequently is that in this, many lawyers, Swadeshi lawyers, they tried to defend the so-called rioters. Chidambaram Pillai himself, here is the contrast between Gandhi and Vavasi. You know what Gandhi did after Ezhuchiyum? He suspended the non-cooperation movement. That was his political ideology. He would not countenance any violence. VOC, coming from the Tilak's camp, he helped through his friends to defend all those who were arrested and charged. And many of the so-called ringleaders, when they were released before VOC himself was released, what he did was he arranged for dinner to be provided, commemorative dinner to them in his home. He wrote to his family and said, X, Y, our friends who did this got convicted in this. After this uprising, please throw a proper feast to them. All these things were done. But coming to the last part, the most tragic part of this is that this story is completely unknown. Until I wrote the first version in 1986, nobody was even aware of what Tirunelveli, so-called Tirunelveli Kalagam meant. Even though Paramasivan, the probably the most important cultural historian of Tirunelveli, he himself told me that until I read your little book, I was not aware of this. What happened was two things. Once again, our hero is responsible for in July when 1908 VOC was charged and convicted of sedition. Right? He got 2 life sentences. Man has only 1 life. Got 2 life sentences. One for delivering seditious speeches, and second for abetting the seditious speech of Subramanya Siva. The irony is that Subramanya Siva himself got only 10 years for delivering the seditious speech. For abetment he got 20 years. So what happened was that, this is my reading, all those people who tried to help by collecting money, raising funds, appearing pro bono in the courts to defend the common people, when the double life imprisonment was given, I think they shared it, scared, and they developed cold feet. Understand? He said, this is very serious. Tilak is getting 6 years. Others in Bengal are getting 3 years and 4 years. Here you have Chidambaram Pillai getting 2 life imprisonments. Subramanya Siva got 10 years. Some of the people who were arrested on charges of, one was incendiarism, they burned things. They were given 7 years, 5 years. So they really got scared, and they did not leave behind. They destroyed all the records that they had with them. Okay. And then double whammy was that 2 years later, in 1911, Ash, who was responsible for, to a great extent, for what happened in Tuticorin, he was killed, he was assassinated. Now, in the entire history of the freedom movement in Tamil Nadu, no British officer was assassinated. When that happened, the few who were left behind, who still had some courage, got really, really scared. Can we get this thing working? I want to show a couple of images before I end. This is an image I found from some records. I don't know the names, but it comes basically from that period. Siva, this is a map of how the crowd moved. This is Arthur Lawley, who was the governor then, one of our villains. Yeah, he acted in a completely petty manner. This is Gurusami here. This was one of the man who backstabbed Chidambaram Pillai during the entire course of the Swadeshi steel navigation company. He deeply resented Chidambaram Pillai's rise to prominence. In fact, he said on record to the governor, "VOC is after all a metric grade. I am a graduate of the Madras Christian College. Okay? He is ordinary pleader. I am a member of the Madras Legislative Council." But the other irony is that this man, who acted in such a petty manner, backstabbed and betrayed Vausi, his younger brother was so totally devoted to Vausi. Totally devoted. He gave up his practice, worked for the company, and when the company went bankrupt, from what I have at least 2 doctors here, so I should not use medical terminology, but I think he suffered clinical depression because a police constable is writing, in the police records. I have been following this man for the last few weeks. He keeps to himself. He doesn't talk. He doesn't make eye contact with anybody. He is always looking sullen. As he was depressed. So, this man, this is what I wanted to show you. So this is Ash, a family man with his wife and his children. This is a picture I got from the grandson of Ash, whom I traced in Ireland. So when he was assassinated, a fund was collected and a memorial was put up. Guess who were the people who collected that money? More importantly, who were the pallbearers? The pallbearers were those who were part of the anti-VOC camp within the Swadeshi company. But also you must think, from the looks of it, he looks like a very conservative Brahmin. How much effort it must have taken for him to act as the pallbearer of a villager. And I really understand. But that was the fear. And they didn't stop with it. They got together, pooled money, raised money, and put up that memorial. So what we have is, to this day, there is a memorial for the perpetrator of the violence. As on date, there is no memorial, there is not even a blue plaque, there is not even a toll flex board for the ordinary jatkawala, the butcher, the barber, the shopkeeper who laid down their lives. That is why when I met our Chief Minister, the only request I made to him is that please put up at least a description, a plaque or a pillar to commemorate the people who gave their lives for a bigger, larger cause. So my book gives you this full story. Let me also make a sales pitch. I've been writing for a very long time in Tamil. So when I write in Tamil, people will ask me, where is the English book, sir? Will you write in English? So now I've written the English book. They are asking me, can I get a Tamil version? So, I know it's very awkward. I know that many of you have bought the book, but please get a copy. It gives you the full story of the shipping company. And the Tamil book gives you the story of just this one day's event. What happened before, what happened later. I think sorry I didn't take the 3 hours that I written in take. I've taken long enough.
I think another round of applause for a fantastic storyteller. We all sat there and it reminded me of the days when people told you stories and say, "Who kottu appadina?" So who kottu? And the very it was exactly like that. Thank you so much. Does anyone have any questions?
This uprising, was it spontaneous or was there somebody who spearheaded or who started this? This kind of uprising, when there is no communication, mass communication, how did it suddenly start? Was it organic or was it spontaneous?
Okay. What the great historian Ranajit Guha calls the prose of counterinsurgency. The state will never ever concede that an uprising is spontaneous. For them, it is always manipulated. There is a conspiracy. The common people don't have mind. They are like sheep. And usually, the words, especially in the British official vocabulary, they are usually described as rowdies, riffraff, mob, senseless, and there is also one word which has gone out of use now, badmash. That's how it's spelled in English. You know what? Scoundrels, this is how they describe it. It is always planned by some manipulators. But what you see, the record that I have seen, the way I have reconstructed the story, there's no clear plan. People just spontaneously got together. And that's why also it peters up. If it is planned, it would have got sustained. It is always like this. So it was organic, it was spontaneous. Very importantly, I think, underlined that earlier, it was a thinking crowd. No European was there. Even though what they did was, all the Europeans were asked to take shelter in the building in the Madras Bank. And the other aspect also is, anybody familiar with, passage to India would know that British, the Europeans greatly feared the violation of their women by India. That was a great fear. But there is practically no recorded instance of bodily harm inflicted on women. In fact, when the one British officer Jackson was shot, attempted murder on him, the wife got killed. It was a huge criticism from the nationalists. They said, no, it's completely wrong to. And Subramania Bharati, when Ash was shot, what he said? He said, it is wrong to have killed him when he was with his wife. So, this revolutionary violence that was used by, that is why Khudiram Bose, nobody thinks of him as a murderer. Khudiram Bose is always seen as this great figure. So, it was a very discerning crowd. No Europeans were attacked. European women were not harmed at all. No money was stolen. Bodily harm was not inflicted. Only physical property was attacked. So it was a politically
consciously.
Great. So, two quick questions. One is, what were your primary sources for you to come across all these instances? And secondly, the Swadeshi shipping company ran from 1906 to 1910, which was around 4.5 to 5 years. Sedition arrest of VOC happened in immediately after that, and he spent 2 years, and after which he was released. So he didn't go through with this double life imprisonments. He was in jail for 2 years. Is that true? Can you please corroborate?
The records I have used, I have given it in the full bibliography. Police records, police documents, government proceedings, transcripts of interviews, newspapers, autobiographies, memoirs. VOC was given 2 life imprisonments. He went on appeal to the High Court. The High Court confirmed his conviction. He said conviction was right, but it said that the sentence was too harsh. So it was reduced to 6 years. And taking into account some revisions and things like that, he spent something like 4 years and 10 months in prison. That is the
Is that memorial still there? The Ash Memorial?
it is very much there.
Still there?
It's still there. If you want to get stoned, that is the best place in stoned. That's the place. Unfortunately, memorials, no memorial. I mean, sometimes you are thankful that there is no memorial for the people who gave their lives, because that is how we, treat our memorials. It is still there.
Is the famous movie by Swadeshi, Kaploti Tamil, is it fairly representative of views?
It's a difficult question because I watched it when I was 14. I was moved by it. It takes a part of his life, and I think discount all those commercial elements that are introduced into it. But I think it is a very important depiction because it carried the fame of VOC to the people. So, and I was certainly impressed by Shivaji Ganesan's performance. Some characterizations were very good. And we should also remember that the movie was made within 25 years of VOC's death, which meant that there were still a lot of people who were alive who had known him and nobody really objected. But that's it. This man was unlucky man. The film was a box office failure. It bombed. The film bombed. Only later, after the Congress got now these days, Congress is blamed for everything, right? But they have to be blamed for a number of things. But one of the things is that they didn't seek the praise of their own leaders. So it was after the DMK came to power, right? Tax-free concession was given to the film. So when I watched the film in Virugambakam National, the 2 rupee ticket, I paid only 1 rupee 10 paisa. 90 paisa entertainment tax. So I would say, I can't watch the movie now because I break into tears. When that Bharatiya song is played and Vavasi in the secular scene, and I'm not the songs are outstanding. Probably best renderings of Bharati's song G. Ramnagari music. But casting is also, casting is very good. very interesting way in which that Panditya certain shots are amazing. No? Tilak comes in only one shot. Tilak is played by Tilakara nadichadu yaar? We are both the director. So what happens is only a profile is shown. It's not shown fully. He takes the card, says Mr. Pillai, place for a day. For their times, it was a good film, some memorable dialogues.
So thank you all very much for being here this evening. I think we all benefited from all that we heard this evening. Thank you, Mr. Venkachalapathy. I think he does not compromise. That is the one thing I've learned after hearing him several times. He does not compromise with himself. He's extremely harsh on his own ability to write biographies. This is what I remember. So he's turned the craft, the art and everything and brought this book to us. I hope many of us will read it. Thank you very much. Thank you to the Ashwila Gallery and all the people here, the photographers, the people who operated the mics, and thank you to all the staff for giving us this beautiful place and these exhibits that we could look at. Thank you very much for being here, and thank you all very much for making this a wonderful evening to remember. Good night.